Good evening. So tonight out of Kansas City, Missouri, directly from the plaza with my update on a few things. But before we're going to get started, I just wanted to share a couple things, personal things with you. And the reason why I stay in a hotel, I live about 45 minutes from here. And I could drive here to the plaza, do whatever I need to do and then drive back home. But I don't have a swimming pool at home. And I don't get a lot of exercise. And I used to do a lot of sports. I was very active in sports, fencing, swimming, and alpine downhill skiing. And so my muscle system has to be exercised now and then. Otherwise, I get stiff as a board. And this hotel here has a very nice swimming pool, which I can use. So I combine a couple things together. Usually the plaza area here right behind me is, we have a lot of restaurants here. There's shopping there. It's a little bit upscale. And so you combine the shopping with the dining and the exercise I need. Plus I get to see a friend of mine. She lives close by, and we don't have a lot of time, so we can get to spend some time together here. So that's kind of on how this all fits together. And she actually has 3 daughters, so going over to her house and visit there is a different story. So we have our little time here, far away. It gives her a break, gives me a break, and we can enjoy everything. That was just a personal thing, The other thing is my educational background is electronic engineering on one hand and a international business management. I went for that to Pace University in New York City in downtown Manhattan on the east side. It's right by the Brooklyn Bridge, by the New York Downtown Hospital that was renamed recently. And I went to undergraduate school there, and I did some extra studies there for financial management and stock markets and related things, those kind of things. I also went to Bloomberg, for the Bloomberg used to have they called it the Bloomberg University. That was basically a training facility to use their terminal system to do research. And I did this between Pace and Bloomberg. That is something I wanted to throw in. While I was going there to Bloomberg, one of the perks you get is they have a lot of events going on, because Bloomberg Television is in the same building there, or the same facility there in the basement basically. And the Bloomberg TV is produced there. So if you're on cable, you can watch CNBC or Bloomberg. That's the 2 more popular. Fox has a financial channel too, but I have never really watched this because I'm usually a CNBC and Bloomberg guy. I watch both of these channels, and I monitor, what's going on very closely in the financial markets. And so this is the reason why I thought I'm going to bring up the topics tonight. I also got myself a coffee, since I got a coffee maker here with Starbucks coffee. I prefer just iced coffee. I get the ice cubes out of the ice machine, and then I brew coffee, and I just make iced coffee, black iced coffee. That is my preferred beverage, and that way my mouth won't get as dry. Now, as you probably know, is that the gasoline prices have gone up pretty much everywhere. And for us here in the United States, this has been a long time in the making. And I want to give you an example. When I first moved here permanently, I came over here in 1989. before the Berlin Wall or the wall collapsed, before everything went down. And I spent a year over here, and then I went back after the wall had collapsed, just about the time when the reunification happened. And then I spent another 8 or 9 months in Germany, and then I came back over here. This was all work-related through various different friends I have here, and military contacts and that sort of stuff. That's how I basically came back here. I went here, I came back, and I've been here since August 1991. When I came here, say like, let's count it from 91 on, the United States had about 280 million inhabitants. And rent was cheap, you know, compared to today's standard, not so much in the price you're paying, but for how long you actually had to work for it to afford rent. And the same was with gas or gasoline and food. Gasoline was 95 cents a gallon. And the average wage, the minimum wage back then was $4.25 an hour. And if you made $300 a week, you could easily live very easy. The average grocery bill was about $20 a week. At 95 cents, the tank fill was about $15. And the average going rate for one bedroom apartment was about $150, $150. Maybe 125, you know, some cheap places, maybe $80 a month. The more expensive ones, they were $200, $300. A house, to rent a house was $400 or $500 a month, and that was pretty expensive back then, thinking about it. So everything was more in a balance, much more in a balance, and it was by far more affordable. And what happened now is the United States has a immigration policy where they let an X amount of people from all over the world with geopolitical preferences, depending on what is going on where, migrate to the United States, visas and green card or family visas and that sort of stuff. And that number is somewhere around 100 to 200,000 people per year. That is the planned, immigration. So you figure you're going to increase the population, say like every 10 years by 2 million people, and you do that for 30 years, you're going to have 6 million more people here. That is not quite the way it worked out because of the border to Mexico, which is for the better part a green border. And they estimated, for one, is they took in a lot more people and they issued by far more visas than the 150 or 200,000, that was closer to 500,000, what actually immigrated in it with political asylum and this, that, and the other thing. The green card flow had pretty much stayed steady at 100,000 or 80,000 visas, but the rest came with asylum and family and visas and that sort of stuff, and then illegal immigration. So the birth rate has stayed stable, and we are now at 335 million people. So we have increased since I've moved here by 55 million people. And of course, if you put 55 million more people into a country, the country will grow. 55 million more people will need housing. They will need that, this, and the other thing. So the demand for everything increased, for food, for clothing, for gas, for housing, all of this stuff. And that has now created a problem, especially with the gasoline and the diesel, because most of the refineries we have, they were built in the 1960s and 1970s with the two oil shocks we had. America evaluated their need for gasoline, and they calculated this on how much they need to, be able to process. So they were strategically placed where they could get oil from the Middle East or oil from other places, or they can use their own oil. We have a very extensive pipeline network here in the United States between refineries, oil fields, oil storage facilities, and the same for gasoline and jet fuel. So most of the large airports here, they're actually connected via a pipeline to the closest refinery to get jet fuel. And the US military has several pipelines to their storage facilities as well. East Coast, West Coast, here in the central, and then down south. And depending on who needs what, they have prioritized, the refineries prioritized this. So now, even though before the Ukraine war, or whatever we want to call it, the war, which it really is, started, we had already experienced last year, when we had that deep freeze down there in Texas, that some of the Texas refineries went offline because the equipment got damaged from the freezing. They're not used to this, the equipment or the refineries were not prepared for this. For the refining, you also need sand. And sand has become a very difficult to get commodity in the quality you needed. There's a wide variety in that too. Part of this is all COVID related, COVID-19. That was really the underlying cause of this. So when COVID-19 started, the oil market and gasoline market basically collapsed here in the United States. Our gasoline price went down to prices we hadn't seen in probably 20 years or so. And then because everything was shut down, people didn't want to go out of their house, they were scared, and they just sat here and no one went anywhere. So it was clear that once we come sort of out of this induced coma, we were in the United States, some cities or states were more locked down than others. Here in the Midwest, we were fairly liberal with this. I didn't travel very far. I went on 2 or 3 trips, but that was basically it, because my business is considered essential since it is military related. And in this, so with the reopening now, 2 things happened. Is that we had a surge now. People want to go and travel. They want to drive. They want to go out and eat. They want to see. They want to go to the movies. They want to do stuff, All of the stuff they couldn't do while they were locked up at home. People didn't have to drive to work because they were working from home. So all of these things accumulated here already last year. As the restriction eased off from COVID-19, so did the demand increase for those gasoline and diesel related products. And at the same time, with reopening the economy, there was a great need to get new parts and material and everything else distributed, which created a huge demand in the trucking industry. And that caused then, the diesel prices to go up already last year. And the same is true for jet fuel. People started to fly again, the airlines reopened and all of this good stuff. Now, the inflation was primarily increased, got a big bolt when Biden and the Democrats came up with the 2 programs they want to institute to rebuild America. That is that $4 trillion package. I don't think they have passed this yet. And that $1.8 trillion package, which they did pass last year. And that is a lot of expenditures in the infrastructure. So the construction materials went up because everyone was smelling the money to come in. And a lot of these projects, of course, haven't started yet. But just the reality of that $1.8 trillion are going to flow from the federal government here over the next, 4 years or 6 years, into the economy, created a massive inflation. And it started out primarily with the steel sector, the steel, metal, and everything construction related, where you would need for road building, airports, and that sort of stuff. Concrete, everything related to concrete, sand, cement, iron, in that case for the, what do you call it, the rebar, which goes into the concrete, and then wood, lumber, and on the list goes. That was the first thing what exploded last year with the prices. The steel went up by 300%. The 10% you're hearing is just the overall thing. Certain sectors exploded, and steel was one of them. So was lumber, and it is still high up. It's probably 200% over what it was. And in this whole scenario here of having the federal government spending all this money, that also increased the fuel prices already. So we were already strained with refinery capacity on one hand, a growing population, which has, like I said, is increased by 55 million people since I've moved here. And then the release or the pending or approved infrastructure repairs we're going to do in about $1.8 trillion. That is 12 zeros. No, 9 zeros with the 8. Yeah, it's an unbelievable amount of money. Plus, we had already pumped into $6 or $7 trillion into the economy during COVID-19. That was with the EIDL, the Emergency Loan Program from the Small Business Administration, the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP. That's what they called that. And then several loans and other, financial support for the airlines, and everyone else, basically got money. Plus, the government dished out $1,500 a person, as financial assistance through the IRS, which was directly deposited into our bank accounts, and they did that 3 times. So I got like $4,500 for doing nothing. Normally I have to send them money. In this case, the IRS deposited that money into my bank account. That happened for 200 million or some more Americans. Basically anyone over the age of 18 who had filed taxes before. They got that money, and then they came up with the extended child credit, which was paid directly out as well. And so all of this money is now in circulation, and this has created the inflation we're seeing at the moment. So we had already a higher gas price issue, or, in the first place. But the real underlying issue at this point is not so much the oil price or the amount of oil available here in the United States. We have plenty of oil here. It is the refining capacities which have come under strain. And the East Coast now is more under strain because, for 2 reasons. The official, statement from the U.S. government is because we're selling now more gasoline, not just oil, but refined gasoline, to Europe, so they can unwind their oil imports out of Russia. And we have to make up now for the refinery loss in the Ukraine. So a lot of this oil or gas, what goes to Europe actually winds up in the Ukraine, because they lost their refining capacities. The refineries there were basically bombed by the Russians. Now, on the other hand, is with the diesel fuel, of course, with the ongoing war, that has created an even bigger demand over in Europe. For one is NATO, with 150,000 men and the entire logistics which come with it, including the air forces, which have a tremendous amount of need for jet fuel, and the increased air traffic, military air traffic now from the United States into Europe and forwards and backwards. All of this has to come from somewhere. So this has put an additional strain onto the refineries, primarily on the East Coast, because the East Coast is closer to Europe. So the supplies for those things come from there. So the Ukrainian army needs diesel and jet fuel, and so does all the NATO members. They have to increase too. Plus, they want to get rid of the oil from Russia, which means all of this has to come from somewhere. And right now, the United States is making up the shortfall or the capacity needed out of the East Coast, which has bumped up the prices on the East Coast for the average consumer for diesel and jet fuel, as well for the airlines. Gasoline itself is not that big of a deal. We still got more enough. It is primarily the constraints of diesel and jet fuel and naphtha. That is the three main areas, and we will see how that goes. Is because the troop movements, the ongoing support of the NATO forces consumes a tremendous amount of fuel, especially diesel and jet fuel, and that we didn't have last year. This is now a direct result out of the Russian-Ukrainian war there. So that kind of, should explain this. The West Coast itself is sustained too. I'm not exactly sure what the deal is now on the West Coast, but they have higher taxes there for to dissuade people from driving. These are three Democratic states, and California is probably the worst state out of all 50 states if it comes to gasoline and diesel taxes. And they wanted to take a tax break over there to get some relief for the people. But, that doesn't, politically they can't get this through. And because of higher the cost of for diesel and for fuel is higher the taxes are going to be, because it's proportional, it's a percentage. And 10% out of 50 cents is 5 cents. And 10% out of $5 is 50 cents, and it is a lot more than just 10%. That would be easy, but it is a lot more. So in California, on the West Coast, the gasoline station owners or the companies which own, make the equipment, the pumps for them, they have already started to convert the electronics in them with the displays to be able to display prices greater than $10, because right now they stop at $9.99. That was so far out back then when they went to electronic displays, LCD displays, that no one would have ever thought we're getting to this point, but they have to be replaced now. So they're updating the gas stations there in anticipation that by the fall that diesel will be over $10 a gallon in California, and that's going to be absolutely crazy. So we're basically in the process of heading for a recession with this stuff. And it is not just one thing which caused it. It is like with so many things in life, it is cumulative. One thing adds to the other. And I guess with that, we have touched one of the most important subjects here at the current time, is because for us, diesel is very important for the trucking industry to move products. We move most of the things by rail, but then from the rail yards, wherever that they are, the individual containers or what have you, they have to be transported then to their final destination. And all of the stuff is done by truck. So the most truck routes are up to 500 to 800 mile normally. And some items, they just cannot be shipped easily by rail. So they're usually, moved by truck to begin with. A lot, especially food-related items. That is the, fresh foods and that sort of stuff, what is either in the cooler or in a freezer truck, basically. Those things are usually moved, and because it is faster as well, anything that has to be moved faster. These are the pressing issues of our time here in the United States. I watched a advertising today that is unrelated now to the fuel, and that was Dan Bongino, who said that YouTube blocked them finally and they had moved over to Rumble. Now, I'm not a person who follows Dan Bongino, and I just think that these people are just too extreme for my taste. The same way I don't follow the ultra-left people either. What I found interesting is we have a shortage now here with baby formula, and the right-wing, I don't know which one it was, but the right-wing, more extreme right-wing podcasters, they started to blame the immigrants which came up here, the illegal South Americans or legal South Americans, and they said they were buying up all the baby formula and shipping them to South America, and now the poor Americans here didn't have any more baby formula. Then it turns out that we have only 4 companies here left in the United States which produce baby formula. One of them is in Michigan, and the FDA actually had shut down the Michigan operation of the company in Michigan because they had a bacteria gotten into the baby formula, and 6 babies got sick. 2 of them unfortunately died, and the other 4 are still in intensive care. That's why that facility was basically shut down, and that caused a drop of 25% in the supply of available baby formula. And the FDA did not have money in their budget to purchase or to purchase baby formula which could be imported. So they needed an extra $28 million, and they approved it, I think, last week with that $40 billion package. And they will be importing now baby formula to make up for that closed facility in Michigan. But this gives you an overall idea of what the United States is like. And this is one of the reasons I really don't like the extreme podcasters with their opinions. Is they're distorting the truth. They're sitting here, they're blaming a group of people which had absolutely nothing to do with the baby formula issue, but rather economical reasons were there. We went through a lot of consolidation, so they could close down excess manufacturing capability we had here, and to reduce the employee count and all of that stuff by downsizing this, and that way they were able to keep the prices up and the profits high. So it's regular corporate stuff basically which led to this. At one point or another, I understand there were 10 manufacturers of baby formulas, and now we have 4 of them left. So they bought up the competition as it is usual, and that increased their market share, and then that took off the competition so they could bump up the prices. At the same time, they consolidated the manufacturing. And that's sort of what created the situation. Now, then you have one manufacturer falling out, in this case with a pretty bad thing. What happened there with this bacteria being introduced into the baby formula, and then you got a shortage because the company accounted for 25% of the supply of the stuff. It sure hasn't gotten any easier. I do not think these corporate people can get us out of anything. They have gotten us into a lot of stuff, but that is the reason why I never took up a job in the corporate world, even though I have enough background in education in it. I found it very dangerous back then to diversify your manufacturing as we have. In our times at the moment, there's probably not one country which can truly manufacture everything. China is probably there, but the engineering and R&D is not quite there with the with our standards, we cannot manufacture the stuff what we dream up. We can dream it up, but we can build it, and they cannot dream it up, but they can build it. So it's like the opposite in it. Eventually, the Chinese are going to close that loop. They're going to gain the expertise, and they're going to be the only country on the planet which can design and build things. And that is when they're going to take over as the world leader. And then Europe and the United States and Russia, all three of us, are going to be left in the dust at this point. That is, so instead of fighting a war with the Russians, the Ukraine is, Russia should have thought about this, of what would be the better route to go, instead of working this, because Russia always has viewed China as a potential threat because they're right directly next to them. And there's wide open plains where they can just roll in with their tanks. And that may come to this. And with that, we're right at our 30-minute mark. I may make another video tomorrow night. And in that video, we're going to focus again a little bit more on the Ukraine and on the plans in Russia to build more military equipment. Because Mr. Putin wants to beef up his eastern flank of the country towards the NATO countries there, and he has great plans, and he wants to build another 2,000 tanks. We'll get old tanks, basically rehabbed and improved and that sort of stuff, but 2,000 tanks is a lot of tanks, thinking about it. So there's a lot to come, and we can talk a little bit about the Ukraine military and the unique strategies they're employing in combating the presented danger there, or the attacks from the Russians. However, they still have not quite, or the command has still not quite understood yet to the full extent of what the Russians actually up to and what their long-term strategy is. But the unique approach to this, we want to focus on, and that will be then our next video. And with this, you have a great evening from Kansas City, from the 18th floor in the Sheraton. Thank you.